started off with Newton's first law, saying that if an object is at rest, it will continue to stay in that state of rest until there is a push or a pull to make it move. And when things start to move, if the velocity changes, then we say there is an acceleration. So this first law gives us an idea that if there is a force and if things start to move, if the ball is rolling and it starts to go faster, there is an acceleration and there has to be a relationship between the two. And it also told us that this idea that the object is not moving, it resists to move, that resistance is called as inertia, and we call this as the law of inertia. Then if there are two objects, and we can say this object is very heavy because you are applying the force and it just doesn't move. Whereas you have a small ball and you apply force and it starts to move. That gives us an idea that there is mass, the amount of matter matters, how much matter is present. And we call that as mass, and we said that if the mass is small, you need a bigger force to move it. So mass is actually a measure of inertia. So mass is a measure of inertia. I didn't write it, but if you want, you can write it. That mass is a measure of inertia. And mass is a scalar quantity. It is measured in grams. Is it okay if I stand and teach? So then in the second law, we try to measure. And this second law talks about, gives us an idea about how to measure this force. So we said, okay, if there is an object of mass m, you apply force, it starts to move, it has an acceleration. Then we said if we double the force, acceleration is bigger. If I triple the force, acceleration will be even more. And then on the other side, we said if you keep the force constant, and if you keep stacking mass one on top of the other, what happens is the acceleration decreases. So from here, the first we said that acceleration is directly proportional to force. And here we said acceleration is inversely proportional to acceleration is inversely proportional to mass, which means as this goes up, this will go down. Whereas here, if this goes up, this will go up as well. So then we combined these and we said acceleration is the ratio of force to mass. And then since force is a vector quantity, so in terms of vector, we wrote F equal to ma. Both force and acceleration, they are both vector quantities, whereas mass is a scalar quantity. And then we defined Newton, which is the unit of force, and Newton is equal to, is like kilogram meter per second square. In US for force, we use pounds. For force, we are using this unit of pounds. And 1 Newton is 0.225 pounds. So is Newton a big quantity or a very small quantity? Small quantity. It's a little less than a quarter of a pound, correct? Yes, it's like a cooked quarter pound burger. That's what it is. So it's very small. Okay, so just give you an idea about the force. So you know what is Newton. Okay? Now, if force is a vector quantity, and if I have an object here, and if I pull with this force here, since force is a vector quantity, won't you say that there is an x component and a y component. Correct?
Mhm.
So the force in the x direction will make the object go in what direction? The force is in the x direction, what direction will the object move?
Horizontal.
To x, in the x direction, right? If the force is to the right, it will move to the right. Can a force in the x direction produce motion vertically?
No.
No? If I push on an object, it goes up.
No.
Can that happen?
No.
No? Absolutely not, right? Don't make it happen in the exam. That's number one to understand. That if there are multiple forces, so we say this equation here can be written in this is what we use mostly. We say that the force in the x direction is equal to mass times acceleration in the x direction. So to make it a little bit more intuitive, let's say I have an object of mass m, and if I apply a force of say 5 Newton here, and then I add another force of 10 Newton. What's the net force? How much is the net force?
15.
15? Okay. And what direction is the force? Which direction will the object move? To the right. So there are multiple forces, right? So what did we do? Did we add them? But making sure it's a vector. In this case, if I have this situation here, where you have a force of 10 Newton, and you apply a force in this direction of 5 Newton, which direction will the object move? 5 Newton to the right. So in this case, we said 5 Newton, which means you took into account that force is a vector quantity, isn't it? So we can say these equations, let me write it here, that this equation that we wrote as F equal to ma, that's how vector helps, remove vectors well. So F equal to ma, this particular equation actually, when we use it, we write this as sum of all the forces in the x direction is equal to mass times acceleration in the x direction, and sum of all the forces in the y direction is equal to mass times acceleration in the y direction. So these are my two equations that I will continuously use to do all the problems. But can you see with x, I don't have any ay, correct? Fx is responsible for ax. Fy is responsible for ay. Horizontal force will not make an object go vertical, and a vertical force will not make an object go back and forth, right? Now let me talk about this. Let's say I have an object here. There is a force of 5 Newton, and there is a force of 5 Newton. Correct? There are forces present, right? Will it cause acceleration? No?
No.
Because you are saying that force is a vector and the net force is equal to 0. So in this case, if the net force is 0, what is the acceleration?
0.
Can you say whether the object is at rest or object is moving?
It's at rest.
At rest? Everybody? No? about constant velocity? Is this right?
Since there's no acceleration, yeah.
So when the net force is zero, it means the acceleration is zero, which means that the object is either at rest or moving with constant velocity, and this is called as equilibrium. So for equilibrium, when the problem says the object is in equilibrium, or when if the problem says object is moving with constant velocity, is it equilibrium? So that will be the hardest thing to recognize when the problem says object is moving with constant velocity. If it is moving with constant velocity, then the acceleration is zero. If the acceleration is zero, will the force be zero? Net force will be zero. Doesn't mean that there is no force, correct? In this case, there are two forces acting, right? There are two forces acting, and still the acceleration is zero, right? So we are not talking about the total force, we are talking about the net force, we are talking about the direction of the force. So we are thinking about all those things, and we say that object is in equilibrium. So what are the conditions for equilibrium? Under what condition will the object be in equilibrium? So for equilibrium condition, these are the two equations we use. Fx equal to 0, sum of all the forces in x is 0, and sum of all the forces in y is 0. These are the two equations that defines equilibrium. So when you have problems on equilibrium, you have to consider all the forces, and then you say sum of all the forces in x is 0, sum of all the forces in y is 0. If the acceleration is 0, then the net force is 0, so isn't it like first law? Is it? Is it like first law? Newton's first law of motion?
Yeah.
No? Yes. The first law of motion, we said an object will continue to stay in the state of rest or with constant velocity unless acted upon by force, right? If there is no force, then the object will be in equilibrium, right? Which means it is first law, right? So can we derive first law from second law? Yeah. First law just says that if the object is at rest, it will continue to stay in the state of rest unless acted upon by a force, net force. There can be, so this law defines even more clearly that even if there are forces present, but if that net force is 0, then object will not move, or it will move with constant velocity. So there are two things in equilibrium: at rest or moving with constant velocity. Okay, so here is this. There is an object of mass m, and if you drop this mass, does it come down? Yeah? And you said it's because of gravity, right? So there should be a gravitational force, right? In what direction? Down. And what is force? Force is mass times acceleration, right? So if I drop this object, what is the acceleration of the object? G. Acceleration is G. So the force that is present here is equal to m times G, right? And this force is called as the weight of an object, and it's represented by lowercase w. So what's the unit of weight? Unit of weight. What is it? Kilograms. Mass is kilogram. Newton. So force, right? is a force, correct? Don't you have here like a kilogram here, and what is G? G is meter over second square. What is kilogram meter over second square? Isn't it meter? Okay, so unit of the weight is meter. Now tell me, if I have an object like this and bigger mass here, and I drop both of them from the third floor, correct? Does this have a smaller force and this has a bigger force? No? So if the force is big, acceleration should be big, right? Correct? So this big mass should have more acceleration than the smaller mass. But if I drop both from the first floor, which will hit the ground first?
They both hit it at the same time.
Same time?
Yeah.
What is their acceleration?
9.8.
Same acceleration. So where is Newton's law failing? What is it not? It's a bigger force, bigger acceleration, right? What is happening? It seems like Newton's law is not observed, obeyed.
Air resistance.
Error, no air resistance, free fall.
Well, it doesn't take gravity from different planets into account, right? Gravity's acceleration is different on different planets. So.
Oh, but this isn't the same planet, Earth. I'm just dropping from the third floor.
Right, that's why I'm saying it fails, right? Because if our gravity would be different, then there would be different acceleration downward, no?
Newton's law so far hasn't failed. Think.
What was the question?
I said this is a smaller ball, this is a big ball. This has less, so the force of gravity is less on this. Mg. Is this smaller mass? Is this a bigger mass? Is this force smaller? Is this force bigger? Yeah? So then according to Newton's law, it says F equal to ma, right? So to go more force means more acceleration, correct? But we know its acceleration is same, right? Why? That's all the question is. Why? Why is the acceleration same? You're right, acceleration is same. Yeah.
I mean, if I think about it as an F equals ma, then technically, as mass gets larger, so does force. So if you divide, so to get acceleration, you have to divide force by the mass.
Yeah, because acceleration, what she's saying is acceleration depends not just on force, but it's a ratio of force and mass, isn't it? So we have to consider that here the force is smaller and mass is smaller. Here force is big and mass is big, right? And ratio can be same, correct? And that's what is happening here. So that's why they both have same acceleration. So when you think of acceleration, think of both force and mass, not just the force. Not like, oh, force is bigger, so acceleration has to be bigger. Not necessarily true. Okay, so understand that both are important. Now, let's consider this mass and weight. And we are always confused between the two, so let's make sure that we understand the difference between mass and weight. Mass is represented by small m, right? And weight is represented by lowercase w. Are they related? Are they related to each other?
Yes.
Yeah? W equal to mg, this is how they are related. So if the mass is more, will the weight be more? Yeah. Let's say if the mass is 1 kilogram, how much is the weight? 9.8 Newton. Okay. if the mass is 100 kilo, how much is the weight? 100 kilogram.
Oh.
980 Newton. Okay. So one is measured in kilogram, the other is measured in Newton, right? What else can you tell me? Is this a scalar quantity? Is this a vector quantity? What is the direction of the weight? Down? Mass has no direction, correct? Okay. And what is mass? Mass is amount of matter, right? Present in a body. And what is weight? Weight is a gravitational force, right? Force of gravity, correct? Yes? Will mass change from place to place? If you go from Earth to Moon or Jupiter, will the mass change?
No.
No. Okay. Will the weight change?
Yes.
So we can say mass is always constant. It's a constant quantity. Whereas weight changes from place to place depending on gravity. Correct? Let's say yes, so far? Those are the differences. So you understand them, so then you answer this. Let's say I have a brick, lead brick. Lead bricks are pretty heavy, right? Is it easier to lift on Earth than Moon? Or it's easier on Moon than Earth? Easier on the Moon to lift, correct? Because when you lift, you are applying a force against the force of gravity, and if the gravity is less, it's easy to lift, right? Now what if you kick the lead brick? Will your toes hurt? Is the pain more on Earth than Moon? Or what's the answer? You understand the question, right?
Yeah. More on Earth. So there's more on Earth because there's more than that force.
More on Earth? It'll hurt more on Earth? Other people thinking? When you are kicking, what are you doing? You're applying a force like this, right? And trying to move, right? Is gravity playing any role in here? I'm kicking like this, right? In the x direction. And trying to move it in the x direction, right? So is the gravity playing any role here? Gravity is like this, right? So what are you doing is you are applying a force to move the mass, give it some acceleration, right? Correct?
Mm-hmm.
So is the mass different? So will your pain be different? How much it hurts? Because you are doing horizontal force, right? It has nothing to do with vertical. That's why I was saying that vertical force has nothing to do with the horizontal motion. And horizontal force has nothing to do with vertical motion. They are two different things. So when you are applying a force, this way you're trying to move the mass, isn't it? Correct? And the mass is same everywhere, right? So will the pain be same? Got it? You have a question?
I was just thinking that, so when it causes friction, but we're avoiding friction. Yeah.
No friction right now. Now, let's say you are in the business of buying and selling. Let's say, so in chemistry or in physics also, when you use the balance, you have a two-pen balance here, and let's say you put some salt in here, and then what do you do on the other side? You put some weights, correct? And when the needle comes in the middle and you say then this salt has this much mass, right? Correct? The salt here has so much mass, right? What are we doing here? Isn't there G present in both cases? And that G is same because you are on the same place, right? So you are equating the force and you're saying that because G is same, mass is same. But that's not true with spring balance that you use in grocery stores, right? You don't have two-pen balance, correct? It's like a spring balance. You add the mass. What it does is the gravity pulls the spring. How much ever it pulls, it reads the weight in pounds, correct? So what we are buying in US is weight, isn't it? Not mass, weight, correct? It's a pull of the gravity. And can you buy gold in pounds somewhere? Any place. Usually they sell gold in grams. Even if you have money to buy 1 pound of gold, they won't sell you in pounds. Because gold is expensive. Does the G change from place to place on earth? So the same 1 pound of gold can be different in different places? Right? So if you're in the business of buying and selling gold, would you buy on earth, sell on moon, or buy on moon and sell on earth? Buy on moon, sell on earth? Huh? Yeah. Buy on moon. Because on moon, G is less, right? So can you stack a lot more gold than on earth? 6 times more. Actually, G on moon is 1/6 the G on earth. And that's why gold and platinum, some of these expensive material, they are not sold in pounds. Even on earth, because there is a small change in G, and that can cause a change in what you are buying, and they will never sell those things. So there is a difference between weight and mass. This confusion is more in the United States than any other country. Because in all other countries they use grams and kilograms. So people don't have that much confusion between weight and mass. But weight and mass are two different things. Do you understand differences? Yeah, is there any question on this one? Kicking and feeling the pain. People are still thinking about it. Is there any doubt? No? Clear? Okay, moving on. So what I'll do is I'll first describe the 3 laws, the first, second, third, all 3 laws. And then I'll add different information. But before I describe the 3rd law, I have to introduce one thing here. Let's say this is a table. And here is a book sitting on the table. Book sits on the table, right? Like this laptop sits on the table. What is one, and if the book has mass m, what is one force that is acting here? Mg? Can there be a place where there is no mg? No. So mg force is always present. Let's call this as W. And if your book sits on the table, and there is an mg force, then the book should come down, correct? There's a downward force. Yes? But it's sitting there, right? Like this laptop is sitting there. So what can you say? Is there, if there is a downward force and the object is not moving, then there is a upward force counteracting the downward force, correct? So there has to be a force in the upward direction, and if the book is not moving, then this upward force should be equal to the downward force, correct? So who is applying this upward force? Table. Because there is nothing else, right? You have table and the book. So table is applying the force in what direction? Exactly up. Just like weight is vertically down, this force is vertically up, right? Okay. So this force, we call it as, this force is perpendicular to the surface. Yes, this force is perpendicular to the surface. And who is offering this force? The surface is offering the force, right? And this force is therefore called as a normal force. Normal means perpendicular, right? In mathematical terms, normal is right angles. So this is a normal force, and we represent this with N. This is also a natural force, just like the weight. Weight is always present, right? So the normal force is present whenever the object is on a surface. If an object is falling down, will there be a normal force? You drop the ball and it comes down. Is there a normal force? No. So do not draw a normal force when the object is coming down freely. You have to draw a normal force whenever object is resting on a surface. Whenever object is resting on a surface, there has to be a normal force. Got it? So I introduced two forces right now, right? Weight and normal force. Which is always present, weight or normal force? Weight. Normal force is present whenever there is a surface, right? Okay. Now let's consider this. If I have an object sitting on an inclined plane like this, how shall I draw mg? How shall I draw mg? Vertically down? Because mg, it always has to be vertically down. Because it's the gravitational force, right? How shall I draw the normal force? Perpendicular to the surface. So will it be like this? Perpendicular to the surface. So make sure that you draw them correctly, perpendicular. So not at any angle. If I ask you in the exam, make sure it's exactly vertical. Angel, you will look at the notes on the.
Yeah.
Alright? So far you understand this, right? Okay. Now, Newton's third law is considered as the law that confused Newton himself, because using his third law, he calculated the speed with which we can send things away from the earth, and that was a very big number. And when he was doing all this, there was nothing that can move that fast, right? So he said, oh, this law must be not correct. There is something wrong because this velocity is so big. So he was confused and he didn't even talk about his third law as much. So now we are using that third law to launch rockets, left, right, and center, right? Blue Origin, like Amazon, they are sending it, and SpaceX sends it, right? Everybody, we are making use of it, correct? Now it's not a surprise. What is Newton's third law? Is It's involved whenever there are two objects. First law, the second law were when we had one object, single object, correct? I never drawn anything, two objects. But this third law is an interactive force, interaction between the two objects. So the Newton's third law comes into play whenever there is an interaction between the two objects. So let's say if I have my fingers, and if I press against the board, can I flex my fingers backwards? Yes? Can I go all the way or it stops someplace? Can I flex my fingers so that my fingers go all the way, or does it stop? It stops. And when you are pressing it, are you feeling as if the wall is pressing on you? Yes? So it's a real force, right? So when I press, I'm pressing on the board and board is pressing back on me, right? And after some time it stops, right? My fingers stops flexing, right? At that time, can you see the force with which I am pressing the board is same as the force with the board is pressing on me? Because that's when my fingers are not moving anymore, right? Correct? Now can I flex my fingers in air? No? Can you flex your fingers by pushing on air? No. Why not?
Because there's nothing to interact with your hand.
Because the air is not able to push back on me, right? Correct? Can you touch someone without being touched? So it's an interactive force, right? And I cannot do anything on this air because this air is not pushing back on me, so I cannot flex my finger. So if I have a paper and hold the paper, can you punch a hole on the paper? I hold the paper free, like this. He has a paper. If I hold it like this, can you punch a hole? No, it's impossible, right? Why? Because this paper is not pushing you back, isn't it? But what if I hold it like this? Can you punch a hole? Yeah. Why? Because now paper is able to push you back, isn't it? So are we talking about interaction? So when we talk about interaction, are there two forces? The force of the hand on the wall and the force of the hand on the wall and wall on the hand, isn't it? Okay. So if you write it in English, like the word, it will make a lot more sense. So if I'm pushing on the wall, then there is a force exerted by the hand on the wall. Yes? And is there a force of the wall on the hand? It has interesting consequences, which is very surprising. So is this good? What did I do? I just changed the words, right? Hand wall, wall hand, isn't it? So if I say hand is 1, can I say F? Can I write this as F12 and F21? Can I say that? If I say hand is 1, wall is 2, is this, yes? Are they reversed, flipped? Which direction is F12 acting? This way? Correct? And which way is F21 acting? Opposite? So you are saying that these two forces are equal in magnitude, opposite in direction, right? Can we say that? So these forces, they always come in pair, equal in magnitude, but opposite in direction. They always come in pair. All forces in nature exist in pairs, actually. They all, but we don't have to consider third law all the time, and I'll come to that. Can I write like this then? Yes? Can I write like that? The minus sign represents that they are in opposite direction, right? And these are called as action-reaction pair. And you can call whichever one force as action and the other force as reaction. So there is no, it's not like this has to be action, that has to be reaction. It's action-reaction pair. If I'm standing in an, okay, yeah. Have you heard of Newton? They always show the picture of the apple, right? It's Newton's laws. Right? So if the apple falls from the tree, is there a force on the apple? Yeah? mg? It's the pull of the gravity which it's bringing it down. Gravity is pulling it down. So Earth is pulling down on the apple. So what will be the reaction force? Apple pulling the earth up? Isn't it? Yeah? That is a true force. Why don't we see this earth coming up? It's massive. That force is so small, right? So if we are standing on a pavement, is gravity pulling me down? Am I pulling the earth up? Yeah. So when we all stand up, we are pulling the earth up. Is the earth moving? Probably. We don't see it. Why? It's so massive. So it doesn't mean that there is no force. It just that it means that that force is not large enough.
So the force of the earth being pulled up, that's a constant force, right? It wouldn't change with the weight of an object? Or
Yeah, it will change. Means it has to be, the two forces have to balance, right?
Okay.
If a 200-pound man stands up and a 100-pound girl stands up, they both will pull the earth by different amount. Yeah. Has to be equal, right? The forces are equal in magnitude, opposite in direction. Got it? So Newton was all confused with that. He was saying that this is, means according to my law, the earth should come up, and I don't see it. And how is this not working? Okay, so it's called action-reaction pair. So if you are, I'll do some examples. If you are playing tug of war, there are two teams pulling on the rope, right? One team is standing on this carpet, okay? And the other team is standing here and wearing socks. That team is barefoot on the carpet, and both the teams are pulling on the rope, right? Understand? Who will win the race? Who will win the race, tug of war race? Huh? Person on the, standing on the carpet, right? Correct? Is it because that, are you understanding? Let's make it a little bit more energy in the class. So is the team on the carpet, is it pulling with a greater force? That's why they are winning? Or is there some other reason? Some other reason? If that team is pulling on the rope, you are also pulling on the rope. Rope is not going anywhere, right? Correct? So isn't the force on the rope should be zero, right? If there's no acceleration. So both the teams are pulling on the rope with the same force. But this team is not getting enough friction, right? No grip. That team has a good grip. So is that another force that's playing a role? So a tug of war is never won by pulling. The greater force. A tug of war is won by how you can hold yourself on the ground, isn't it? Correct? Okay. Now let's go back to this example and let's see if you understand. Please answer. Please answer. I can hear you even with your mask. Let's say here, going back, table and the book. You said there is mg force, right? This, if you understand this example, then you understand the difference between second law and third law, and one more, this example of horse and chariot. If you understand these two examples, then you understand second law, difference between second and third law. So you said there is a normal force, right? Correct? Right?
Yes. Yes.
The book is not going anywhere, right? So n is equal to mg. Yeah? There's no doubt about it. There's no acceleration, so upward force should be equal to downward force, right? Isn't it? Can I say n up minus mg equal to 0 because object is at rest, isn't it? So can I write that this n equal to mg? Right? Okay. Are they action-reaction here? Are these action-reaction? You will be able to give me right answer if you can write it down in words. Which one is which? Force exerted by, on, like that. 1 on 2, 2 on 1, like that. If you write down, you will be able to give me right answer. And you don't have to be right. We are all learning, right? So you don't have to be. We can all make mistakes. Tell me if they are action-reaction. Yes? Yes? Everybody yes? How will you write mg? Force of earth on? Okay. Is this force of earth on the book? Right? How would you write normal force?
Table on book.
Table on book? Are they action-reaction here? No. For action-reaction pair, what was the condition? 1 on 2, 2 on 1, right? 1, 2, 2, 1. Is it 1, 2, 2, 1? No. You have earth, you have book, and you have table. There are 3 things, right? So can I write this? Let's say book is 2. This is F32, isn't it? And what is this? This is F12, right? Earth is 1, for example. Are they action-reaction pair? That's why I said write down, you would see it. Are they both forces acting on the book? The 2 forces that I have written here, are they both acting on the book? They are both acting on the same object, right? And those 2 forces are equal, so the object does not move. Correct? How many objects did I consider to write this? Only one object, the book, right? So what will be the reaction? The reaction to this mg, what will be the reaction? The force of the book pulling the earth up, isn't it? Will that be the reaction? And for this one, what is the reaction for table on the book? The force of the book on the table. This black and red this black and green will always be equal because they form action-reaction pair. But what are the forces acting on the book? Aren't both the black forces are acting on the book, right? And since those two black forces are equal, the book doesn't move. If one of the forces was bigger, if mg was bigger, the book will move down. If normal force was bigger, the book will go up. Okay? But do you understand the action-reaction? So for Newton's second law, when we do Newton's second law, we consider only the object, one object, and we consider all the forces acting on that object. Like I said, book. I considered all the forces acting on the book, right? For Newton's second law, and I said all the forces that are acting on the book are normal force and mg, and they are equal, and therefore the book does not move. Correct? If I have to consider book alone, I don't have to worry about action-reaction pair, right? Now, let's consider this. Horse and the chariot. What does horse do? Pull on the chariot, right? Will the horse pull the chariot in the forward direction? Will the chariot pull back on the horse? Horse pulls on the chariot. Will the chariot pull back on the horse?
Yes.
Yes.
Are they action-reaction pair? Yeah? So if those two are equal, the horse should never be able to pull the chariot forward, right? But we know that the horse pulls the chariot, correct? So there has to be more forces on it, right? So let's say this is the force. Is this the force of the horse on the chariot? On the carriage, whichever way. Is this right? Reaction will be this, the cart pulling on the horse. Are they action-reaction pair?
Yes.
Yeah. When you walk, what do you do? When you're walking on a ground, what do you do? When you walk, are you doing this? Pushing back? Correct? Are you able to walk on ice? You slip on ice, right? You're not able to walk. But on the ground you're able to walk. Why? Because when you push back on the ground pushes you forward, right? Correct? Which we call as friction. On the ice, if there is no friction, you're not able to walk. Correct? So in this case, how is horse walking? Is the horse pushing back on the ground with its feet? So is this the force exerted by the horse on the ground? Yes? Reaction will be, let me use a different color. What will be the reaction? The reaction will be what direction? This one? And it will be the ground on horse. Hey guys, next exam, some of the difficult problems will be from third law, so you need to speak up a little bit more interactive. Otherwise, there's no point. I can teach on Zoom, right? And you can be in your black boxes, and I can be in my black box, and we all can learn physics that way, right? Is this right? What are the forces? Is blue force equal to red force? Are the two red forces same? Yeah? Are the two blue forces same? Two blue forces. Do you see a reversal of the names here? G ground on horse, horse on ground. 1, 2, 2, 1. Action reaction. That's how you think.
Yeah.
So are they action reaction pair?
Mhm.
Will they be equal?
Yeah.
How about these two?
Yeah.
Action reaction pair? Are they equal?
Yeah.
Is this equal to this? Is the red equal to blue?
No.
No. They're two different forces, correct? What are the forces acting on the horse? What are the forces acting on the horse? I've written in English.
The cart and the ground.
So the forces that are acting on the horse are, can I say that they are this and this?
Mhm.
Rest of the forces are not acting on the horse, right?
Mhm.
Are those two forces equal? No.
No.
So how will the horse move forward? Which force has to be bigger?
What's the ground?
2 should be bigger, and then it moves. So if the cart is heavy and things like that, what the horse has to push back with a greater force, and that keeps it moving. So there is an unbalanced force on the horse. That's why horse starts to move. And if you want, you can see this video. The address is there, so it will be. I think can you click on OneDrive? You guys need to try. You see my notes, right, on
Yeah.
Canvas?
Yeah.
You're not able to click on those. I thought they have to hyperlink. Okay, so but you have the address. You can copy paste, right? So that will help you a lot. Okay. So in this case, can you see when we are considering the motion of the horse? What are we doing? We are considering all the forces on the horse, right? Correct? So read this. It will get a little bit more clear when we do problems, but you have to watch some video and things like that. Now, there are many different types of natural forces, and we need to understand all different types of forces. Did we talk about normal force? Yes? And normal force is always perpendicular to the surface, correct? And if there is no surface, then there is no normal force, right? So write down someplace, because you guys are very good in drawing normal force on an object that is falling freely. Will there be a normal force on an object that is falling freely?
No.
Okay, so be careful of those things. So this is normal force. It always acts perpendicular to the surface. So if I have an inclined plane, the normal force will be like this, right? Correct?
Yeah.
And is the mg always present? So always present. This mg is always present. You always have to draw. How do you draw it? You draw it perpendicular to the vertically down. So if I have an object on the inclined plane, this mg will be vertically down. Correct? Now let's say I didn't have time to bring it, but let's say I have a ball. Let's say it's a string here, right? This is a string. Something is hanging here, right? So if I hang a ball to the string, do you think the string is stretched? Do you feel if the string is tight?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yes.
You feel if I hang a ball like here, do you think that the string is taut? Yes? So there is a force, right? So the force that acts on a string rope is called as tension force. And what are the forces here? If this ball has a mass m, is there an mg force here? And then there is a force of tension that we represent with T. How are the forces acting? Am I drawing all the forces acting away from the object? Yes? Okay. So the forces have to be drawn acting away from the object. I didn't draw tension down. I made it go away, right? So make sure that you draw forces away from the object. So what did I do here? I have drawn all the forces acting on the object, right? Correct? So this is called as a force diagram where we draw all the forces, force diagram. Okay? Now what is one force that I have not covered? Friction. So here's force of friction. There are two types of force of friction. One is called as the static force of friction. Excuse me. The other one is called as the kinetic force of friction. The static force of friction acts on the object that is at rest. Static. It acts on the object that is at rest. And this kinetic force of friction acts on a moving object. What time is your SI, Michael?
4:40.
12. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask me, you can, I'll have office hours. I'll be in room 121 right across. And then you can ask me your short question and then go back to SI. You'll get more by attending SI than just, I have only 45 minutes. Okay, but if you want to ask any question, you can quickly ask me and then go back. My office hours today are from 12:15 to 1. Okay? So there are two types of friction. One on a moving object, one on object that is at rest. Who offers friction? Surface? A rough surface offers more friction than a smooth surface. You know all those things like that. And friction is also this, right? Right? Means two surfaces have to rub. Just one surface like this in air is not good. So it's two surfaces. So if an object, if I'm walking on the ground, there is friction between my feet and the ground. Now let's consider static force of friction. Force of friction is represented by lowercase f. That's how I write lowercase f. Force of friction is represented by lowercase f, and static force of friction is represented as F sub S. S stands for static. Let's say here is an object sitting on a surface, and you apply a force of, say, 50 Newton, and the object doesn't move. According to Newton's law, if there is a force, the object should have moved, right? But if it doesn't move, what does it mean? If it doesn't move,
That the static force is also 50 Newtons.
it means there is an opposing force, right? Correct? Is that opposing force 50 or more than 50? We don't know. Do we know? No? We don't know. So it doesn't move. And this opposing force can be equal to 50 or greater than 50. It cannot be less than 50 for sure, right? Are we sure about that? Yeah, it cannot be less than 50. All right. So then you increase it. You increase your force. Okay, it's not moving, and you increase it to 70 Newton, and it still doesn't move. It means that opposing force is at least 70 or more. Correct? And if you just increase it to say 72 Newton, and you see, oh, this object is now giving in and starts to move, which means that 72 Newton is enough to move, right? Correct? So then the static force of friction then in that particular case we can say is equal to 72 Newton. Because then it's on the verge of slipping. It's just on the verge of slipping, ready to move. It hasn't moved, but it's ready. You feel that it's going to move now. The static force of friction is related to the normal force. It's related to the normal force. And we say that this static force is, Michael, correct me, is it greater than equal to?
Multiply by
Yeah.
mu, right? So it'd be less than or equal to?
Less than equal to?
Because you use less than 1 always. I think so.
You guys have book? You can correct me. I forgot to bring my book today. So, but otherwise I'll correct it later. Hey, somebody had a book. I think she had a book on Monday. What's her name? You had a book, right? On Monday? Do you have book today?
Oh, the textbook?
Yeah.
I
She had it, I think, right? You had it.
No,
No?
I don't have it.
No, you don't. But yes. Yeah. I don't remember the names right. You didn't have a book?
Yeah.
I'll correct it. Or you can correct yourself. You look at the book. What is this? This is a Greek letter called mu sub s. This mu sub s is called as the coefficient of static friction. This coefficient of static friction is a pure number. It's a number. It has no units. Mu sub s has no units. And this mu sub s will always be less than 1. So when you're doing a problem and you solve and you get mu sub s as 1.3, it means you're doing something wrong. Okay? It always has to be less than 1 and has no units. And what does it depend on? It depends on the nature of two surfaces. Two surfaces that are in contact. So if I have two objects, one has a mass of 10 kilo and another object that has a mass of 100 kilo, and they are both resting on the same surface. Correct? Which will experience greater force of static force of friction. What is it related to? Normal force, right? So, which will experience greater static force of friction? 100 kilo? because it's 100 kilo, on this 100 kilo, is there mg present? Down, which is 100 times 9.8, correct? And there is a normal force here, right? Is that normal force equal to mg? So this has a bigger normal force, right? In what direction is the force of friction if I'm trying to push this object and this object? What's the direction of the force of static force of friction? To opposite. So friction always acts opposite to the, in this case it's not even moving, right? But is the right direction is the perceived direction of motion? If you are applying force in the right, in which direction do you think it will move? To the right, correct? So if it doesn't move, then the friction is acting opposite, isn't it? So force of friction always, you can write that the force of friction always acts opposite to the direction of motion. Always acts, friction acts opposite to direction of motion. People usually say, right, it's much easier to, it's very hard to make an object move, but once it moves, it's much easier to keep it going. Is that true? Then, if that is true, then the static force of friction, once you are applying a force, object is not moving, you keep increasing and it just starts to move. Once it starts to move, you don't need that much force, isn't it? To keep it going. Which means the kinetic force of friction is slightly less than the static force of friction. You need less force. The kinetic force of friction is represented by Fk, and this Fk has to be always less than Fs because it does not take much to keep it going. And this Fk is given by mu k times n. So this is also related to the normal force. Mu k is called as the coefficient of kinetic friction. And if Fk is less than Fs, then mu k should be less than mu sub s, isn't it? And this mu k also depends on the nature of the surface. What is the unit of force of friction? What's the unit? Kilogram, meters. What is the unit of force of friction? Newton. Okay. And this, can I say this also acts opposite to direction of motion? So when you do problems and if it says there is friction, you have to draw the force of friction. If the problem says there is a frictionless surface, then you don't have to worry about force of friction. And force of friction depends only on the normal surface. Force of friction depends upon the two surfaces that are in contact. Force of friction does not depend on the area of contact. How big the object is, it does not depend on that because we don't have that here in the equation. So many times people will think that if there is a greater area, at least for solids, we are talking about solids. It is different for liquids and gases, the friction, the conditions and all that. It's a little bit more difficult. That's why we are not doing air resistance in this class. So those things are slightly different. But in case of a solid object, it only depends on the normal force. It does not depend on the area of contact. People put fat tires, right, in their cars, and they think they will have much better maneuver, they can maneuver better because there is much more friction and grip is there and all those things. That's not true. Only thing that is true is that if you put wider tires, your mass of the car is distributed over a greater area, right? So the wear and tear on the tires will be slightly less. But you are not able to go at 80 and make a right turn someplace. No, that's not true. It only does not happen. Okay, so it's clear? Now I want to do something here. I want to leave you with that so you can practice, think about it. And Michael, you will do SI this week on 1, 2, 3, right? Up to Friday, and then you will go to chapter 4, right?
Yeah, so I was gonna ask, the test is on Monday next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, we'll do review on Friday, and then, yeah, we'll move forward after that.
Got it, guys? Alright. Let's say here is an object tied to the string. You need to speak up, guys, for chapter 4 if you want me to do problems from chapter 4. If you don't speak up, I will not do problems, I'll move to chapter 5. Because I understand forces, I think. Okay? So you need to speak up. What are the forces present? Tell me. Tension, how shall I draw? Give me a force, give me the direction.
On the
Okay.
string.
Then
Wait.
mg going down. Okay. I have an object here. What are the forces present?
Normal force.
mg going down, normal force going down. Now here is something different. Let's consider an object on an inclined plane. I'll draw it big. And here's the object. What are the forces?
Normal force.
Straight going down, straight down,
Straight down.
okay. mg like this, and this is say theta, right? And normal force perpendicular to the surface. Which direction will this go, this object? Down the incline? So in an inclined plane, is the motion going to be always along the inclined plane? On a horizontal surface, the motion is always going to be along the horizontal surface, right? And if the ball is coming down, the motion is always going to be in the vertical direction, correct? Right? So in this case, since the direction of motion is along the incline, we choose this to be our x-axis and this as y-axis. So our coordinate system is changed. We take our coordinate system based on the motion, and it will make the math very simple. That's why we do it. We make the math simple. Do you understand that? Which direction do you want to take positive on the incline? Down the incline positive, up negative, or down negative, up positive? How do you want to do it? And we'll try to stick to that. Nobody gives you this many choices in any of your classes. They just tell you what to do, right? I'm giving you choices, so speak up.
Down the incline positive.
Okay, good for you. This is positive. And this is positive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll stick with that. If I change, you remind me. Okay. Alright, so which force do I have to resolve here? N or mg? Huh? N or mg? Mg. You said N. How many people think mg? Only one? Other people you didn't have breakfast to raise your hands up? Or what?
What do you mean resolve?
Means find x and y count. Which force is at an angle that I have to find its x and y component? Let me say that. That's called resolving force. mg? Okay. It changed, right? Okay. Anyone else? mg? Because norm n is perpendicular in the y direction, right?
Right.
So I don't. Okay. How shall I draw the x component of mg? For the lack of time, can I draw mg x